The number one thing you need to do if you are a bodybuilder or hoping to build your booty, if you have any desire at all to build your glutes and grow your glutes, you have to learn how to recruit your glutes. It is so hard to recruit your glutes and consistently train your glutes without having any awareness of how to work your pelvic floor. And now when people say work your pelvic floor, it doesn't mean that you do Kegels. It doesn't mean that you stick vaginal weights up your vagina. It doesn't mean that you get a little device that you play games on your phone as it's stuck up inside of you. That is not what we're talking about here. To work and truly learn how to operate your pelvic floor means that you get range of motion of your pelvic floor. And the more that you can elongate the muscles of your pelvic floor, the easier and quicker it'll be for you to grow your glutes. So if you have any interest at all in strengthening your glutes, building your booty, or you have been told that you have weak hips and weak glutes and you need to grow your glutes, then what you need to do is you have to learn how to control your pelvic floor. You should absolutely get pelvic floor physical therapy done on your pelvic floor, manual therapy. Now, I say pelvic floor physical therapy, and I want to asterisk that massively because it is done so differently in so many different places. What you truly need is you need hands-on physical manual manipulation or manual therapy consistently inside the pelvic floor until your pelvic floor gets to a good dynamic place where it can fully open and relax and contract. Now, we live our life in the contracted state, so you don't actually have to train that. And if you have a glute training program, then that is simply enough for you to build your glutes while helping open up pelvic floor. And doing the glute building will overflow into pelvic floor. That is enough strengthening for the pelvic floor. You don't need any more contraction-based exercises for the pelvic floor. So doing any additional Kegels is actually typically harmful when you're going and already training glutes and legs. Teach the muscle of the pelvic floor, which is a dynamic muscle that looks like a bowl. When it's in this bowl shape, it should open and it should close. Again, the resting position is already closed. And for most fitness athletes and bodybuilders, the pelvic floor is usually even elevated and tightened. And yes, you might be like, oh, that's so good. That's good for my sex life. That's good for my whatever life. Yes, sure, but no. Actually, the tighter it is, the less blood flow it has, the less natural lubrication you have, the more uncomfortable intercourse is, the more dynamic it is, the more blood flow you have, the beefier it is, and the healthier it is, the better it feels for intercourse for both partners. And so you actually want to gain that dynamic strength, and especially if you're a bodybuilder, you understand this. If a muscle isn't getting blood flow, it becomes dehydrated. It becomes like beef jerky. The more hydrated a muscle is, it becomes like a juicy steak or a juicy chicken breast. That's what we want the pelvic floor to do. So the juicier we can get it by opening it up with manual physical therapy and manual therapy inside the pelvic floor, the more that we can get the natural health of the pelvic floor to improve. And if we don't get that natural health of the pelvic floor to improve, then what you're going to end up is with just a really tight mess, and you're going to end up with decreased hip movement. So in order to grow the glutes, you need to have hip flexion and extension. So you need to be able to flex the hip and extend the hip. You also have to be able to abduct the hip and adduct the hip. You also have to be able to rotate the hip inward and rotate the hip externally. So inward rotation and external rotation, those are the essential motions of the hip. Now, you have some pelvic floor muscles inside your pelvis. The muscle bellies are located inside the vaginal canal or intrarectally, so through the rectum. And if you open and lengthen these muscles, then that is going to allow you to have increased hip range of motion. If you have increased hip range of motion, it's going to allow you to work the muscles of the hip, the glutes, much better. It's going to allow those muscles to grow. So you're going to get much better growth if you have good hip range of motion. Now, why do we need this? Because most bodybuilders and people in fitness have a way tight pelvic floors, but yet they're working so hard and training so hard and have their diet so locked in to grow their glutes. But if their pelvic floor is so contracted and tight, it's going to be really hard for the ball to glide within the socket. That's called arthrokinematics, how the joint itself moves. And if the arthrokinematics are messed up and you're not getting that normal movement and dropping of the ball in the socket, then it's really hard for your glutes to stretch and contract when you're trying to build them. So this is my take-home message for every single bodybuilder and fitness athlete out there trying to grow their glutes or get stronger in their hips, get stronger in their cores. You absolutely need pelvic floor physical therapy as just a maintenance tool to keep you going and as good body work. A lot of people will add in, massage therapy, acupuncture, chiropractic, regular physical therapy, all said and great. But if you truly are trying to grow your lower body at all, or trying to truly develop your glutes, this is the number one thing that if you add it in, and yes, it's expensive, you're not going to get insurance to pay for this, but this is so protective for your health, because also when you're weightlifting and you're straining and pushing downward, increasing your intra-abdominal pressure, that can predispose you to have pelvic organ prolapse and other issues with your bladder, your rectum, your uterus. And so we also will work on breath patterns in order to ensure that you can keep your pelvic floor and keep your pelvic organs in a really good space as you grow your glutes and your legs. So I hope you found this helpful. I'm Dr. Allison Felt. I own Body Motion Physical Therapy located in Edmonds, Washington. People fly from across the world to come to our clinic for intensive therapy weeks where they get therapy and pelvic floor physical therapy so that we open up their pelvic floors and unlock the potential of their hips and their glute growth, especially if they're plateaued and they've worked really hard to try to develop their glutes and it's just not working. We have the solution for you. It is called pelvic floor physical therapy, and it is intense manual internal work, and it is not Kegels, it is not devices, it is not wands even. This needs to be done by someone who truly understands how to get your muscles as healthy as possible so we can get your hips moving as perfect as possible with the right patterns to activate your glutes and grow your glutes. I hope you found this information helpful. I'm Dr. Allison Felt. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Share this with all your friends who are trying to grow their glutes too.